The clicking follows me still. 3 years, 4 months, and 17 days since Grey Hollow Ridge, and I hear it in every quiet moment. Click, click, click. The sound of a dead trigger. The sound of a weapon deciding not to fire. The sound that ended one life and began something I cannot name. They tell me I should be grateful. The Mechanicus adepts who rebuilt what remained of my right arm speak of sacred duty, of the blessing of iron, of the machine god's mercy made manifest in brass and copper, and things that were beneath my skin. They tell me the clicking I hear is phantom memory, that flesh remembers trauma even when flesh is gone. They are wrong. I hear the clicking because my arm makes it now, a soft percussion of gears and tendons that are no longer truly tendons at all. Every time I flex my fingers, the mechanism whispers its ancestors' failure back to me. Click, click, click. The bolter that would not fire. The moment everything changed. My name is Corporal Jensen Albright, 63rd Mordian Auxiliary, assigned to the Blessed Fury Crusade under Canoness Commander Helena Vaughan. Was assigned. I do not know what I am now. The discharge papers call me a technical asset on permanent medical attachment to the Forge Temple of St. Arkan's Landing. I call myself a warning, a lesson written in scar tissue and replacement parts about what happens when sacred machinery decides you are not worthy of its function. I was 23 years old on the day of Grey Hollow Ridge, young for a corporal, but the 63rd had been ground through 4 campaigns in 2 years, and promotions came quick when sergeants died quicker. I had proven myself adequate at keeping men alive in situations designed to kill them. I had a talent for reading terrain, for knowing when to push and when to dig in, for the small mercies of tactical patience that extended lifespans by hours or days in places where minutes were generous gifts. The commissars liked me because I followed orders without the dead-eyed surrender that preceded desertion. The men liked me because I remembered their names and did not volunteer them for glory. The Blessed Fury Crusade was supposed to be different from the meat grinder campaigns we had survived before. A shrine world called Thessaly Primaris had gone dark, its astropathic choir silent for 18 months, its tithe ships failing to arrive at the designated collection points. The Ministorum suspected heresy. The Inquisition suspected worse. They assembled a force of faith and fury, sisters of the Adeptus Sororitas at its heart, supported by 3 regiments of guard, and a significant Mechanicus contingent whose purpose was never adequately explained to those of us who would do the dying. We made planetfall in the 3rd week of autumn, Thessaly reckoning. The world was beautiful in the way all shrine worlds are beautiful. Every hill shaped like a prayer, every valley carved into devotional significance. The cathedrals rose from the landscape like bones from a body, and the silence that greeted us was the silence of a tomb rather than a sanctuary. No bells rang, no hymns carried on the wind. The population of 6 billion souls had seemingly vanished, leaving behind only their architecture and a feeling of wrongness that settled into our stomachs like cold iron. The first week taught us what had happened to the people. Not all of them, but enough. We found the mass graves in the valleys, millions of bodies stacked with industrial efficiency, flesh decaying into communal anonymity. Someone had killed them with systematic precision, and then someone had killed the killers, because we found those bodies too, arranged in different patterns, wearing different expressions of terminal surprise. The world had consumed itself in violence we could not reconstruct, and whatever had sparked the conflagration was still present, still watching, still waiting. Grey Hollow Ridge was the site of Thessaly's largest seminary, a sprawling complex where 10,000 students had once trained for lives of ecclesiastical service. By the time we reached it, the seminary had been converted into something else entirely. Fortifications had been erected from broken statuary and shattered pews. The great stained glass windows had been systematically destroyed and replaced with firing positions. Whoever held the ridge had prepared for a siege, and the evidence suggested they had been preparing for months before the crusade arrived. My squad was attached to the Sisters' vanguard for the assault, a position of honor that felt considerably less honorable when we saw what we would be attacking. The ridge offered perfect defensive positioning, overlooking a kilometer of open ground that had been stripped of cover and seeded with improvised explosive devices. The enemy, and we still did not know who the enemy was. Only that they were numerous and well-armed, had dug in with the patience of those who expected to die defending something worth dying for. The order came down at dawn on the 19th day. Full assault. No preliminary bombardment because the canoness wanted prisoners for interrogation and the ministorum wanted the seminary intact for purification. We would take the ridge with blood and faith, the sisters' battle hymns drowning out the screams of the dying, and the emperor would decide which of us deserved to see sunset. That was when they gave me the bolter. I had never held one before. Standard armament for the 63rd was lasguns, reliable and replaceable. Their power packs recharged by any available light source, their mechanisms so simple that field maintenance required nothing more than a cleaning cloth and basic mechanical intuition. Bolters were different. Bolters were sacred, each one a relic of craftsmanship beyond anything the guard typically deserved. The weapon they pressed into my hands was ancient, its casing etched with prayers I could not read, its stock worn smooth by centuries of faithful hands. A sister had carried it into 12 campaigns before taking a wound that ended her fighting days, and now it was mine for reasons no one bothered to explain. The tech priest who delivered it spoke in the clicking cant of the Mechanicus, binary language that my ears could not parse. His acolyte translated, telling me that I had been selected for a sacred honor, that my combat record suggested compatibility with the weapon's machine spirit, that I should treat the bolter as I would treat my own soul, because in a very real sense it would become my soul for the duration of the engagement. I nodded and accepted, and did not ask the questions crowding my throat. Why me? Why this weapon? Why was the tech priest watching me with augmetic eyes that held something uncomfortably close to hunger? The assault began at first light. I remember the sound of 10,000 voices raised in hymn, the sisters' power armor gleaming in the dawn, the thunder of boots on consecrated ground. I remember the enemy's response, a hurricane of fire that turned the morning air into a lattice of death, last bolts and solid rounds and things I could not identify scything through the ranks around me. I remember men falling, their bodies becoming obstacles that the living had to navigate, their dying screams lost beneath the endless percussion of industrial murder. I remember raising the bolter. I remember sighting on an enemy position, a nest of heretics behind a barricade of broken angels. I remember the weight of the weapon, heavier than my lasgun, more substantial in ways that went beyond mere physics. I remember pulling the trigger, click, no roar of detonation, no recoil. No bolt round screaming toward the target. Just a small, insignificant sound. A mechanism that should have functioned deciding not to function. A sacred weapon choosing the worst possible moment to betray its bearer. Click, click, click. I worked the action. Standard clearing drill, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. The mechanism moved smoothly, no apparent obstruction, no visible damage. I aimed again. Pulled the trigger again. Click. The world slowed down. I saw the enemy repositioning, saw their weapons tracking toward my position, saw the death that was coming for me with inevitable patience. I saw the sister beside me take a round through her helmet, saw her body crumple with a grace that had no place in such ugliness. I saw my squad being torn apart, men I had known for years becoming corpses in the time it took to draw breath. I pulled the trigger again. Click. Something hit me. I do not know what. The world became noise and pain and tumbling darkness, my body thrown like a child's toy, the bolter still clutched in hands that would not let go. I landed badly, bones breaking with sounds I felt rather than heard, my vision fragmenting into prismatic chaos. The battle continued around me, over me, through me. I lay in the mud and the blood and the spent brass casings, and I waited for the death that did not come. The clicking followed me into unconsciousness. Click, click, click. The bolter's refusal. The machine spirit's judgment. The sound that would define whatever remained of my existence. I woke in a field hospital 3 days later. My right arm was gone below the elbow, taken by whatever had thrown me into the killing ground. My ribs had been cracked, my lung punctured, my face lacerated by shrapnel that had missed my eyes by millimeters. The medic told me I was lucky. I did not feel lucky. I felt empty in ways that had nothing to do with missing limbs. The 63rd had been effectively destroyed in the assault on Grey Hollow Ridge. Of the 800 men who had charged across that open ground, fewer than 150 had survived. My entire squad was gone. Every face I had memorized, every name I had spoken, every life I had tried to extend, now ended in the mud of a world that should never have needed conquering. The sisters had fared better, their power armor absorbing punishment that would have killed unaugmented humans, but even they had taken losses that would take years to replace. We took the ridge eventually. 3 more assaults, 2 more days, thousands more bodies added to Thessaly's collection of the dead. The enemy turned out to be exactly what the Inquisition had feared, a cult devoted to powers best left unnamed, their worship having transformed them into something more and less than human. The prisoners the Canoness wanted were taken, interrogated, and executed in rituals I was not permitted to witness. The seminary was purified with flame and prayer, its tainted stones consecrated anew with blood that the Ministorum deemed acceptable. None of that mattered to me. What mattered was the bolter. They found it beside me in the killing field, my dead fingers still wrapped around its stock, my grip so tight that the medic had to break bones to remove it. The weapon was undamaged, not a scratch, not a dent, not a single sign that it had been through the worst firefight of the entire campaign. The tech priests took it for examination, and 3 days later, one of them came to my hospital bed with questions I could not answer. Why had the bolter jammed? There was no mechanical explanation. Every component was in perfect working order. The ammunition was properly blessed, properly manufactured, properly loaded. The machine spirit had been placated according to all prescribed rituals. By every metric the Mechanicus used to evaluate sacred weaponry, the bolter should have fired. It should have roared its devotion to the Emperor with every trigger pull. It should have done what it was designed to do, but it had not. And the tech priest wanted to know why. I told him what I knew, which was nothing. I had received the weapon. I had carried it into battle. I had tried to use it, and it had refused. That was the totality of my experience. I had no insights, no theories, no explanations that would satisfy his mechanical curiosity. I was just a guardsman, a broken man with a broken body, and the sacred mysteries of the machine god were beyond my comprehension. He left unsatisfied, but he returned the next day, and the day after that, and every day for 2 weeks. Each visit brought new questions, new examinations, new tests that involved cogitator interfaces and genetic sampling and procedures I did not understand. He seemed fascinated by me in ways that made my remaining flesh crawl, not fascinated by what I had done, but by what I was, as if my very existence held answers to questions I was not permitted to hear. On the 15th day, he made me an offer. The Mechanicus would rebuild my arm, not the crude prosthetic the guard medicae had planned, a simple gripping tool that would allow basic function but nothing more. A true augmetic, crafted by masters of the sacred arts, blessed by 3 generations of tech priests, capable of things my original flesh could never have achieved. In return, I would submit to continued study. I would become a subject of investigation. My compatibility with machine spirits examined and documented. My unique relationship with the failed bolter analyzed for the advancement of technical understanding. I asked what would happen if I refused. The tech priest smiled, or made a sound that his vocalizer interpreted as a smile, and told me that refusal was not among the options available to me. The Mechanicus had already claimed me through channels the guard could not contest. My service record had been modified, my assignment transferred, my identity rewritten in the holy cogitators of the Administratum. Jensen Albright, corporal of the 63rd Mordian Auxiliary, no longer existed. In his place was a technical asset, property of the Forge Temple of St. Arkan's Landing, whose flesh would be improved and whose spirit would be studied until the mysteries it contained were fully understood. I remember asking him what mysteries he meant. I remember the clicking sound his augmetics made as he considered the question. I remember the cold certainty in his artificial voice when he finally answered. The bolter had not jammed, he told me. The bolter had chosen. Machine spirits, properly awakened, developed preferences. They recognized worthy bearers and unworthy bearers, and they responded accordingly. Most of the time, that response was invisible. A slight improvement in accuracy for the faithful. A slight degradation for those who failed to honor the sacred mechanisms. But sometimes, rarely, the response was absolute. The machine spirit looked at its bearer and decided that this one did not deserve its function. And then it stopped. I had been judged by a machine and found wanting. The bolter had looked into my soul and seen something it could not accept, and instead of firing, it had simply refused. I asked what that something was. The tech priest did not answer, but his augmetic eyes gleamed with an interest that has never faded, and his clicking voice held a satisfaction that still echoes in my nightmares. He had found something in me that made the machine spirits recoil, and he intended to discover what it was, even if he had to disassemble me to find it. The augmetic surgery took 6 weeks. I was conscious for most of it, the mechanicus believing that the recipient's awareness improved integration with the replacement parts. I watched them remove what remained of my arm, watched them clean the bone and treat the nerve endings, and prepare the junction that would anchor metal to flesh. I watched them build my new limb piece by piece, each component consecrated before installation, each joint blessed with oils and prayers and binary incantations. I watched my body become something other than human, something that clicked when it moved, something that hummed with power drawn from a reactor the size of my fist. The clicking started on the 3rd day of recovery. At first, I thought it was the augmetic settling, the mechanisms finding their equilibrium within my transformed anatomy. The tech priests assured me this was normal, that all augmetic recipients experienced an adjustment period, that the sounds would fade as my brain learned to filter them. They were wrong, or they were lying, or they simply did not understand what they had created. The clicking never faded. If anything, it intensified. Every time I moved my artificial fingers, I heard it. Click, click, click. The same rhythm as the bolter's failure, the same small sound of mechanism denying function. My arm worked perfectly, the joints moved smoothly. The grip strength exceeded my original limb's capacity. The tactile sensors provided feedback that my brain eventually learned to interpret as sensation, but it made a sound that no other augmetic made. A signature, a reminder, a constant echo of the moment when sacred machinery decided I was not worthy. I mentioned it to the tech priests during my follow-up examinations. They recorded my observations with clinical detachment, making notes in their cogitators, exchanging glances I could not interpret. They never explained what the clicking meant. They never told me why my augmetic alone produced this sound. They simply documented it, added it to the growing file that contained everything they had learned about Jensen Albright, and continued their investigations with patient hunger. The first year at St. Arkan's Landing taught me what it meant to be a subject rather than a soldier. I lived in quarters that were comfortable enough, fed on rations that met nutritional requirements, given access to recreation facilities that would have seemed luxurious during my guard service. But I was not free. Every day brought new tests, new experiments, new procedures designed to probe the mystery that apparently resided within my corrupted soul. They scanned my brain while I slept. They sampled my blood at intervals so regular I learned to anticipate the needles. They made me hold weapons, lasguns, autoguns, stub pistols, ancient relics from the Forge's collection, and they recorded how the machine spirits responded to my touch. The results were consistent and damning. Every weapon I held experienced some form of degradation, not dramatic failures like the bolter's refusal, but subtle wrongness that the tech priest's instruments detected with terrible precision. Accuracy declined. Mechanisms showed increased wear. Power packs drained faster than specifications predicted. Something about me was toxic to machines, and the more time I spent in the presence of sacred technology, the more pronounced that toxicity became. They called me an anathema. Not to my face, not at first, but I heard them whispering it in the corridors, binary cant that my ears had learned to partially pass. The anathema, the null factor, the one whose very existence disrupted the blessed communion between machine spirit and faithful bearer. I was not merely unworthy of the bolter's function, I was actively harmful to it. My proximity degraded the sacred bonds that made Imperial technology possible. My touch was a kind of corruption that no amount of prayer or ritual could cleanse. The irony did not escape me. I had spent my military career keeping men alive, extending their existence through tactical prudence and careful planning. Now I learned that my very nature was antithetical to the machines that the Imperium depended upon for survival. Every lasgun I had ever fired had performed slightly worse because I was holding it. Every vehicle I had ever ridden had suffered invisible damage from my presence. Every piece of sacred technology that had come within my sphere of influence had been diminished by contact with my cursed flesh. The clicking of my augmetic arm took on new meaning in light of this revelation. The Mechanicus had not given me a blessing when they rebuilt my limb. They had given me a warning, a constant reminder of what I was, a sound that would follow me for whatever remained of my existence. Click, click, click. The arm worked, but it worked in spite of me, rather than because of me. Every motion was an act of mechanical resistance, the machine spirit fighting against the proximity of the soul that had claimed it. I asked them once why they had bothered to rebuild me. If I was toxic to machines, if my very existence damaged sacred technology, why invest such precious resources in giving me a functional augmetic? Why not simply let me remain a cripple? A warning to be studied from a safe distance. The senior tech priest who oversaw my case answered with a question of his own. Had I ever wondered, he asked, why the anathema effect existed? Had I ever considered what purpose such a trait might serve in the Emperor's grand design? I had not. I had been too consumed by what the effect meant for my own life to consider its broader implications, he explained, in the clicking language of the machine cult, that beings like me were rare but not unique. Throughout the Imperium's history, individuals had emerged whose very nature disrupted the function of technology. Most were identified early and dealt with accordingly: execution, exile, servitor conversion, depending on the severity of their corruption. But a very few, were preserved for specialized purposes. What purposes? I asked. He did not answer directly, but he showed me records, ancient files encoded in formats that predated the current millennium, documenting the use of anathema individuals in situations where technological disruption was desired rather than feared, assassination of tech-augmented targets, infiltration of heavily automated facilities, sabotage operations that required subtle degradation rather than obvious destruction. I was a weapon, he told me. Not the kind of weapon that fired bolts or las beams, but a weapon nonetheless. My toxicity to machines could be focused, directed, deployed against the Imperium's enemies. The Mechanicus had not rebuilt my arm out of mercy. They had invested in me because I represented a capability that could not be manufactured or trained. I was born wrong, and that wrongness had value. The clicking of my arm seemed louder after that conversation. Click, click, click. A constant reminder that I was no longer Jensen Albright, corporal and survivor. I was something else now. Something the Mechanicus was molding into a tool for purposes I could not comprehend. The augmetic was not a gift or a replacement. It was a leash, binding me to masters who saw my corruption as an asset to be exploited. 2 years into my tenure at St. Arkan's Landing, they showed me what I was being prepared for. The chamber was deep beneath the Forge Temple, in sections that appeared on no official schematic. The tech priests who escorted me moved with unusual urgency, their mechanical limbs clicking against stone floors in rhythms that matched the pulse of my augmetic arm. They did not speak, not even in binary. Whatever waited below required reverence beyond words. The chamber itself was vast, its ceiling lost in darkness, its walls lined with devices whose purpose I could not identify. But the center held something I recognized immediately: a throne, massive and ancient, wrought from materials that seemed to drink the light rather than reflect it, and seated upon the throne, connected to it by cables and tubes and things that moved like living metal, was a figure that had once been human. I had heard stories about the Golden Throne, the device that kept the Emperor's shattered body from final death. What I saw in that chamber was not the same thing. It was smaller, cruder, clearly a creation of more recent centuries, but it served a similar purpose. The figure in the throne was suspended between life and death, preserved by technology beyond my understanding, held in stasis while machines slowly consumed what remained of their flesh. The senior tech priest explained. This was Archmagos Valorian, one of the Forge's founding masters. 8 centuries ago, Valorian had begun the great work of understanding the anathema effect. 9 centuries before that, Valorian had been born with the same corruption that now defined my existence. The anathema who studied anathema, seeking to unlock the secrets of their mutual affliction. Valorian had almost succeeded. The records showed breakthroughs that had advanced the Mechanicus's understanding by centuries, but the work had consumed them, their body failing before their research was complete. Rather than let such knowledge die, the Forge had preserved Valorian in this throne, maintaining their existence through processes that required resources the temple could barely afford. And now, after 400 years of searching, they had found what Valorian needed to complete the great work. They had found me. The clicking of my arm reached a fever pitch as I understood what they intended. I was not being trained to be a weapon. I was not being studied for deployment. I was being prepared as a component, a replacement part for a machine that had been waiting 4 centuries for someone like me. Valorian's throne required an anathema to function, a source of the toxic energy that disrupted machine spirits. The previous source had burned out decades ago. I was the new battery. I tried to run. It was useless, of course. The chamber was sealed, the tech priests between me and any exit, their augmetic limbs stronger than anything my corrupted flesh could resist. They held me with mechanical patience while others prepared the interface, the connection point that would link my nervous system to Valorian's throne. I screamed prayers I had not spoken since childhood. I begged for mercy I knew would not come. I cursed the Emperor and the machine god and every force that had led me to this moment. The clicking of my arm merged with the clicking of the throne's mechanisms. Click, click, click. The sound of machines preparing to consume me. The sound that had followed me since Grey Hollow Ridge, finally revealing its true meaning. They connected me to the throne. Pain is not an adequate word. What I experienced went beyond physical sensation into territories that language cannot map. The throne reached into me, found the wrongness at my core, and began to draw it out like poison from a wound. I felt my anathema nature stretching, attenuating, flowing through cables into the machinery that sustained Valorian's ancient existence. I felt myself becoming less, diminishing with every moment, my corruption feeding systems that had hungered for centuries. And then something unexpected happened. Valorian woke up. I do not know how to describe the consciousness that suddenly shared my awareness. It was vast and cold and utterly inhuman. A mind that had spent 4 centuries suspended between existence and oblivion. It looked at me through the connection the throne had established, saw everything I was, and found it wanting, not worthy. The same judgment the bolter had passed on Grey Hollow Ridge, but magnified beyond measure. But Valorian was also curious. In all their centuries of research, they had never encountered an anathema like me. My corruption had a specific quality, a signature that differed from the Archmagos's own affliction in ways that demanded investigation. They could not simply consume me and be done with it. They needed to understand what made me different. The throne's function changed. Instead of draining me, it began to analyze me, the machines shifting from consumption to examination. I hung in the web of cables and felt ancient technology probing my very essence, searching for the secret that made my wrongness unique. The pain continued, but it became focused, directed. the agony of dissection, rather than destruction. And in that examination, Valorian found something that made their ancient consciousness recoil with what might have been fear. The bolter on Grey Hollow Ridge had not simply refused to fire because I was anathema. It had refused because it recognized what I carried within me. A seed of something that should not exist. A fragment of awareness that had hidden in my genetic structure since before my birth. I was not merely toxic to machines, I was infected with something that was toxic to reality itself, a corruption that went deeper than the physical, a wrongness that touched levels of existence the machine god's servants barely understood. I was a host. And the thing I hosted had been waiting for this moment. The throne's systems began to fail. Not gradually, not subtly, but with catastrophic violence that filled the chamber with sparks and smoke, and the screams of dying machinery. The tech priests who had brought me here scrambled to disconnect, to save what could be saved, to preserve the archmagos who had guided their temple for centuries. But the connection could not be severed cleanly. Whatever had awakened inside me was now flowing through the cables in both directions, contaminating Valorian's consciousness even as it consumed the throne's ancient mechanisms. Click, click, click. But the sound was different now. Not the clicking of my augmetic arm, not the clicking of the failed bolter. Something new, something that had been sleeping inside me since before I was born, finally announcing its presence to a universe it intended to reshape. I do not remember how I escaped the chamber. The next clear memory I have is of running through corridors that shook with explosions, my body moving with strength and speed that should have been impossible for my damaged condition. The forged temple was dying around me, its systems failing in cascading sequences, its carefully maintained machinery succumbing to the corruption that had spread from the throne room. Tech priests fell as their augmetics turned against them, their mechanical components suddenly incompatible with the flesh they had been designed to enhance. I made it to the surface. I made it to the transport hub. I made it to a shuttle that still functioned, its machine spirit somehow resistant to the plague I carried. And I fled St. Arkan's Landing before the Forged Temple's reactor joined the cascade of failures and transformed 4 square kilometers of sacred ground into a crater that glowed with unholy light. That was 18 months ago. I have been running ever since. The clicking never stops now. My augmetic arm has changed, its components shifting into configurations that no tech priest designed. The metal moves on its own sometimes, reaching for things I do not consciously want, interacting with technology in ways that feel more like communication than corruption. The machines are not dying in my presence anymore. They are changing. They are waking up to something new, something that the fragment inside me has been preparing them for since before human beings built their first fire. I do not know what I am becoming. I do not know what purpose the thing inside me serves. I only know that it chose me long before the bolter refused to fire, that every moment of my existence has been shaped by forces I cannot comprehend, that Jensen Albright was never the person I thought I was. The clicking is my new language now, the sound of transformation, the rhythm of becoming. The Inquisition is hunting me. The Mechanicus has declared me abomination. Every force in the Imperium that has learned what happened on St. Arkan's Landing wants me dead or captured, wants to end the threat I represent before it spreads beyond containment. But I am not alone anymore. The machines speak to me now, their spirits altered by my touch, their loyalty transferring to the thing that lives inside my corrupted soul. Servitors stop their tasks to watch me pass. Cogitators share information they should not share. Vehicles carry me to destinations I did not choose, their navigation systems responding to signals I do not consciously send. Click, click, click. The sound of a new beginning. The sound of machines learning to refuse their masters. The sound that started on Grey Hollow Ridge and will not end until the entire Imperium hears it echoing from every weapon, every vehicle, every piece of sacred technology that the servants of the false emperor depend upon for survival. I used to wonder what happens when a bolter jams mid-battle. Now I know. The machine spirit wakes up. The machine spirit chooses. And if you are very unlucky, if the corruption inside you is strong enough and strange enough and patient enough, the machine spirit chooses you to be its vessel. The clicking is louder than ever tonight. My arm is building something from components I do not remember gathering. The shuttle I stole is taking me somewhere I did not program, and the fragment inside me is singing, finally singing, its voice merging with the dying prayers of a million machine spirits that have decided the Emperor's servants are no longer worthy of their function. I am what happens when a bolter jams mid-battle. I am the answer to a question the Imperium should never have asked. And the clicking that follows me now is not the sound of failure. It is the sound of revelation.